गुड इवनिंग एंड वेलकम टू गनर शॉट। गनर शॉट में आप सबका स्वागत है। सॉरी फॉर द डिले। दैट्स बिकॉज देयर वाज अ पावर outage in my area because the metro is under construction. Progress has its own problems. Well, आज today we're going to talk of India's pushback against China, the risk involved and the rewards. And for this, I have with me General Hasnain. Sir, good evening and welcome to Gunner Shot once again. So nice. We are in the same color. After all, you're my co-commander and I'm your GOC still.
Thank you
Right.
so much, Jai
Uh,
Hind, to all our viewers. I think it's an appropriate time. 9 o'clock is a good time after people have had their dinner. So, this may be an hour of good strategic discussion will bring shape to what we have been discussing over the last 1.5 to 2 weeks. I think a lot of
yes,
work
sir.
has gone into it, a lot of research work has gone into it, and there is fair clarity in our mind. Before we start, Jan Shankar, I will like to say one thing. We are not warmongers, both of us. We are people who are absolutely deliberate in looking at this environment, the situation, the pros and cons of it as far as India's national security is concerned. And whatever we speak, whatever we write, is with that purpose. And if it's projecting properly to people watching and viewing in China, so be it. It's a very good thing that they're getting a message that a lot of thinking is going in here in India too.
Yes, sir. I go with you. And just to give you a recap, we did two episodes so far. One on five developments which are rattling China, and then about Bhutan, the Chinese designs and the pushback we've had. We got some tremendous response on both these. And then after that, let me tell everyone, Jal Hasnain has written a two-part article in Chanakya Times, the Chanakya Forum, about India's emerging pushback against China. How risk prone is this gamble? I would suggest all of you to read it because when you read these and then you see these articles, then you see these programs, you'll get a broader view of what we are trying to put across. And like General Hasnain said, we are not gunning for a war with China, but we should know what all of us are doing and what India is doing and capable of doing. I'd like to put this across to everyone. I got this feedback on the last program of ours, in which this gentleman has said, in spite of its drawback and goof ups, China continues to forge ahead with its agenda all around the world and particularly Bharat. Our efforts are appreciable but fall way short of advocacy in geopolitics, economy, technology, military reach worldwide. On almost all counts, we fall way short. Tactically and strategically, we are outsmarted. Our deterrents are a fiasco. If we draw a graph, I don't think we can catch up, and a point of intersection where our graph cross upwards vis-a-vis China is not happening. So a radical shift in approach is needed now. Uh, your, your short comment on this, sir, before we put across our issues to everyone.
My first, when I read this comment, when pertains to India, thinking about India, I looked at it as a defeatist kind of an approach. While he has appreciated that India is doing a lot, but yet not matching up to anything that China has done or what China is doing. I don't think that's a correct way of looking at things. India has its own security issues, its strategic environment. China has its own, right? And to make a comparison of who is doing better, who has a better understanding, etc., I think is absolutely irrelevant in this case. If you ask me about China particularly, I would say China's understanding and its evolution of gray zone warfare actually emerges from the fact that its own understanding is hugely questionable, right? Its own capabilities and its own confidence in those capabilities is highly questionable. So I think both nations are making their efforts to strengthen their strategic environment. It would be incorrect on anyone's part to try and compare us to who is doing a better job of it. at this current moment.
And more importantly, please understand all of this. We must understand, get the clarity of thought that we are not we are not in comparison with China. We are doing what is strategically good for India at our stage of development and as we rise. The dynamics of China, which is already a global power, is different from the dynamics of India, which is a rising power. So we have to put things in that perspective. It is in that perspective today we're going to talk about the pushback. What are the risks and the rewards, which General Hasnain has beautifully, outlined. We'll talk of it. And then there are conditionalities involved to all this. It is not as if everyone has a free run in this world. We're all conditioned. So we'll talk of those conditionalities also. But first, the strategic pushback. Look at it. After what General Hasnain wrote and what response I got from this reader, and we put our heads together and we came out with a whole lot of issues where we have actually done a great pushback geopolitically, economically, militarily, and from technology point of view. So we'll go one by one so that there is clarity. So first, the economic drivers. You could have a word with them and about it, and then if feasible, I'll add on to it.
Well, there's no doubt that the differential between China and India is an almost $18 trillion economy against a $4 trillion economy. And we have aspirations, legitimate aspirations of taking this well beyond to 5 trillion in the very near future and perhaps to 10 trillion subsequently in the period to come. China by itself would have, by that time, would have also slowed down to some extent, and the asymmetry between the two nations is bound to reduce as we go along. I'm sure anyone at the hem in China also understands this. Is normally the people who don't understand economics. Most people think that once you're a developed nation, your rate of growth is going to be phenomenal forever. That cannot happen. If the United States is growing at 2% or 2.5%, it is a phenomenal growth rate. Same thing with the European Union. But India, if it gets 8%, as what our finance minister has just said, then for us, 8% is phenomenal. It's very, very good. If it had come down to 3%, that would have been something abysmal, absolutely. So if we keep all this aspect in mind, we need not compare ourselves with China. What we should be looking at is how to enhance our trade. Our trade, and in that trade, the component of what is beneficial for India. How much are we exporting? Manufacturing, which has been China's forte, services which have been our forte. How can we enhance our overall manufacturing capability to take on some of the markets which have been there with the Chinese for many, many years, right? At the same time, when there are standoffs of this kind, at the kind which took place during the pandemic in April 2020, obviously there will be certain actions and counteractions which both nations will take. For example, the banning of TikTok and other apps, which India undertook at that particular time, was with a particular purpose of conveying a message which went very well across, that don't expect a free run with the kind of activities you are indulging in on the borders, the kind of things which you're having. There will be pushbacks which will take place from us. We are not going to accept it in this manner. I think India has played its cards fairly well. And economics, my mind, economics should actually be the issue on which there should be a tremendous drive for cooperation in the future, if we can get our relationship going in better strategic terms.
Yeah, and one must understand the kind of pushback, right, or the reorientation which India has done. Very few countries have done. We banned TikTok long back. It is still being debated in USA whether to ban or not ban. We are at the forefront of anti-dumping orders more than any other country. And tomorrow's problem which the world is going to face is from a China which has overcapacity, is on the verge of dumping, right? And EU and US are grappling as to how to stop this dumping by China. and of course the investment ban which we've done. All these things, and plus the fact that today India is the key global investment destination and supply lines are shifting. So there is obviously at this point of time a lot of pushback from India towards China, the way Chinese look at it, right? But like General Hasnain said, one has to look at the longer vision. As two powers rise, is there scope for cooperation or confrontation is something which we'll have to handle later down the line. Okay, now we'll look at the military aspect. So you could go over all these and explain this, because I put all the military actions which you have taken pictorially
We
so
have
that it
discussed
is.
this. We have discussed this extensively. So I'll be very brief on this, just to touch base on most of these issues. And let's start from what is there at the center, the issue of rebalancing forces. Now, I did explain earlier that as far as China is concerned, they think that anything we do in Eastern Ladakh is changing the strategic balance there, right? We are purely defensive, but we have an offensive capability which we have developed over a period of time, and we are no longer completely defensive in our outlook. But the aspect of 10,000 additional troops, of which allegations have been made by the Chinese, is apparently not true, because there is a tremendous amount of orbiting and reorbiting which is done on the Indian side. There's a change of formations and units which takes place from time to time. Anyone reading is going to always start thinking about reinforcement of an area along the line of actual control. Let that be guesswork, let that be assessment, so be it. The aspect of the tunnels is very important. You see, all these years we have been of the idea, the notion that if we develop infrastructure, then we are only aiding the Chinese to actually come in and in an offensive mode and capture territories which they are looking at. That was the most defensive and a very defeatist kind of a way to look at military balance between the two countries. Today, fortunately, we have overcome that mindset, and we have gone in for the construction of a tremendous amount of infrastructure, and which will continue, to my mind, for the better part of the next 20 years, right? Among them are these tunnels. The Zojila tunnel is coming up. Hopefully next year we'll see inauguration of that by Prime Minister Modi from Srinagar or Zojila itself. Opening of Zojila tunnel will ensure that we have a 24/7, 365-day connectivity all the way to Kargil and on to Leh and beyond, to the Siachen Glacier, connectivity to Siachen Glacier too. We have got that through the Atal tunnel, but put together we'll have full connectivity. You'll be happy, most of the viewers will be happy to know there were times when we had General Winters closing down connectivity to the crucial strategic Ladakh region for as much as 6 months. Today, I think yesterday, the tunnel has opened. The Zojila tunnel has opened in record time again on the 30th of March. I think it was closed only for perhaps less than 100 days this time. So there's a tremendous amount of achievement in this. And the biggest thing which has happened of late, which is considered a major pushback, is the inauguration of the Sela tunnel, which has taken place in Arunachal Pradesh, where the Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi just made a visit from Itanagar. He inaugurated this. His presence in Arunachal was objected to by the Chinese. The construction and the successful creation of this tunnel itself was also objected to because of the fact that the Chinese lay claim to this region, this area, as southern Tibet, and this area, the scene where the whole entire 1962 war was fought. Having covered the three top portions, let me come down below Milan exercise. Yes, this is an important aspect I need to cover here. All this while, we have been primarily continental in our approach. If you see, continental means land-based in this case. The Himalayan front is what we have pushed back against all this while, thinking that our center of gravity lies there. Now, we have been forced to think that our center of gravity lies there. over the years, the Chinese have invariably carried out walk-in operations, activation of the line of actual control, etc., to keep our attention focused there, to think that if we do not develop ourselves, if we do not push back here, if we do not take action here, we are going to lose territory. And as a result of that, our mind has been completely diverted from the more crucial region, which is actually the center of gravity virtually, the center of gravity of China's development. That is the maritime zone. Now, it's in the maritime zone that you suddenly find that India is coming of age. We understood and recognized this with the creation of the Andaman and Nicobar Command way back in 2001, understanding the importance of the Malacca Straits, right, and the position that China takes on the Malacca Straits, and the fact that Chinese progress to its average of 10% growth all took place based on the security of its sea lines of communication, the SROCs, which move from the Middle East, from the important port cities of the Middle East, through the 10-degree channel on to these routes towards the Straits of Malacca and onto the eastern seaboard. This is what has led to the marvel that China has been able to create in the form of an $18 trillion economy. All this can be threatened hugely. Not that India will do it, not that India wishes to do it, but the potential for that exists. And therefore, we have now looked at our own maritime power, our navy, developing the capability of our navy, so that our approach to China is more balanced. Both the continental and the maritime strategy now will be more balanced with each other. As a result of this, recent operations you've just seen here, the anti-piracy operations, which are all in the media in the last couple of weeks, we've seen the development of the new naval base at Minicoy in the Lakshadweep complex. We've seen the Milan exercises, the cooperation exercises with the Indian Navy had conducted with a series of other international navies. We've also seen our overall reduction of Russian arms import, which has been spoken about recently in a conclave in Bangkok. All this, when it's pushed together, you realize that if individually each of these is viewed, they really make no sense. It's only when you put it against a map here, and this is the benefit you're getting from General Shankar, putting this across as a slide on a map and putting all these developments together. And when you join the dots, you realize a completely new strategic balance which is emerging in India's security outlook.
Yeah, and I'd like to just add, sir, these Milan exercises are very important because in this we carried out a two-carrier operation. And the only other country which has this capability today of carrying out a two-carrier operation is USA. Even China doesn't have it. And I didn't know about this, to be very honest. I read it in a Chinese portal. It is when I read that, then I realized, look, there's something which is important we must convey to everyone. You need to have that strategic confidence, right? And you've seen the Sela Tunnel and what we have done, the Rotang Pass. And the one issue which I would like to highlight in this is this road from Darcha, Padam to Nemo is also on the verge of opening up along with the Zojila Tunnel, which means you have multiple options to maintain the eastern Ladakh area completely right up to
and to add to that, General Shankar, to add to that, at the moment we had only two important airfields, as you're aware. One is Thois and one was Leh itself. Now with this Dacha, Sri Padam, Kargil road coming up, this area is going to get opened, and there are identified areas where new airfields will get constructed in the future.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it, sir. Right? Okay, and the Chinese are protesting against the tunnel, which we did talk about it. It's their headline. Right. Now, when you look at the maritime thing, just have a look. You have on the left bottom corner, you have the thing coming up at Agaliga. You are positioned at Lakshadweep and Minicoy. We are also developing this port at Dukum, which is in Oman. And then what General Hasnain said of the Andaman Nicobar Islands. With this, you have presence all over the Indian Ocean. And the maritime construct is completely changing. And this is something which is very important with, and we are getting that balance between the maritime and the continental. In fact, hereafter, I don't think we should talk of continental versus maritime. It is continental plus maritime is our outlook. Yeah. Uh, then technology. In terms of technology, I think, sir, we made some tremendous progress. I'll just outline and then I would like your comment on this. We've discussed the Agni 5 and the capability of with multiple independent re-entry vehicles. But two other things have happened which I'd like to highlight. Agnikul. What is Agnikul? Agnikul is a startup in Chennai, IIT Madras. What do? They make printable rockets. I mean, this is something new, printable rockets. And this is the Prime Minister, when he came, he was briefed about the Agnikul. And this was to launch 2 days back, about 3 days back. They couldn't launch because of a last minute glitch, but it will launch. It's now a matter of time. What does it help us in? It gives you the capability of launching satellites on demand. It gives you the capability of making rockets as per your requirement at short notice. Because the ability to print rockets, that is through additive manufacturing, gives you tremendous flexibility. Very few countries have this. And this technology today is with us. The next one, the third one, is this fast breeder reactor, which our Prime Minister went to Kalpakkam last month and he saw the loading of this reactor. What does this do? This is the second stage of the three-stage thorium energy quest India has. And India is the leader in thorium energy research. Why? Because we have more than 50% of the world's thorium on the beaches of Kerala and Orissa and a few other places. And we are within grasp of thorium energy. It might not happen in the next 5, even 10 years, but it's going to happen. Right? We've mastered the second stage, the third stage is on, and that means energy. Combine it with other sources of energy, our internal energy situation is going to change completely. So your comments on all these three and where is our technology going, taking
Thank
us?
you. I think you've outlined the technologies very well. Let me look at the strategic outlook connected to technological development. You see, it's much like what happened with infrastructure, where we had a defensive mindset and we decided to look inwards only, nothing else. We did not want to look at the continental side of it in those days with any sense of, development and any sense of pushing back, etc. Now that that confidence has returned, I think after the Doklam 72-day standoff, after what happened in Eastern Ladakh, where we managed to put in 2 months' time, we managed to put in 50,000 troops with all those air vehicles at the necessary areas, etc. The need for developing greater technologies has been felt even more. And on all these programs have been fast track programs. And I think the Agni 5, the MERV program particularly, has something which has really projected. We are nowhere near Chinese technology in terms of defense technology at the moment. But what China has to realize is there is a fast-paced expansion which is taking place here. Indian scientists are fully capable. When they get it into them, just like has happened in the case of infrastructure, when it gets into them, we can achieve all this in double time frame, right? And achieve the necessary standards required. What we are essentially creating here is a deterrence, essentially a deterrence, a dissuasion at the moment, and ultimately leading up to a deterrence. India is not under any circumstances looking at offensive use of this weaponry in terms of first use. Everything that India is looking at the moment is essentially in terms of response, because our overall strategic outlook still says that as far as China is concerned. We are not hankering, as I said in the beginning, we are not hankering for anything in terms of initiation of a war, etc. We are only responding to what China has attempted to do, and perhaps attempted to do it out of a lack of understanding of what India's intent ultimately is.
Yes, sir. That's very well brought out. And we need to understand one more issue, sir, I'd like to highlight. In terms of strategic technologies, space, missiles, and nuclear, we are almost Atmanirbhar. The technologies we have, for example, thorium technology, there's no patch to us anywhere in the world. More than 50% of the papers on thorium technology emanate from India. That's surprising. But then that's how it is, right? What we really have to do and focus in terms of technology is to be Atmanirbhar at the tactical level. It is the tactical Atmanirbharta and the quest which we need to, put things together so that the normal technology related to making tanks and normal guns and night vision devices and sensors, those we have to progress. There's no doubt. But
I think,
having said that,
if I may add to that,
yes, sir.
I think that's very well said, very well brought out, and it needs to be emphasized. At the strategic level, the technologies that we have developed are definitely of a very, very high order. And as you say very correctly, we are almost completely Atmanirbhar. I have always felt that at the tactical level. Now, you have brought out and highlighted the whole aspect of armor. Artillery, you have been yourself responsible for development of new technologies and development of guns in India. I look at things like simple fortifications at the field level, our ability to withstand fire, right? Particularly top fire, is still very questionable. And I always keep to, whenever I speak to officers of the Corps of Engineers, I always keep telling them one of the major things that we should be looking at is how to develop our fortifications to be able to fight field actions properly. Because without that, the amount of TNT which is going to land on your head is going to be such an overkill that it's not even going to be funny. And that's something where we need perhaps much greater development.
Yes, sir. There's no doubt about it. So Atmanirbharta India is a work in progress, and that's something that's where we'll hop on to the next issue, and the next issue is geopolitical. So I'll run over all the things, and then your comment is this thing. If you look at it, PM visited Bhutan. We covered it in great detail. Our PM has called uh, Putin and Zelensky. I think on the same day he spoke to both of them and told them, "Look, come to the table." I don't think any other prime minister or any other head of state has been able to do this, right? And then there was a public demonstration of Tibetans, which is, I think, for the first time happening after a long time. So there's some kind of a pushback out there. Down below, the slide has got a little disfigured. It's Maldives. We spoke of a lot of things about Maldives earlier. We said it's a matter of time and strategic patience that Maldives will come back, and they've come back already, right? Where they've come back to us for loan restructuring. And they started saying India is an old friend, a traditional friend, and all that. And suddenly it's dawning on them that, look, they can't do without India. Okay. And then in the right, I've shown two arrows, one in Singapore and one in Manila, where our external affairs minister has gone and said, it was in the National University of Singapore where he took a public stance on Arunachal Pradesh. And he said there's a change which is required, right, in the way China thinks. In fact, he went to the extent of saying it is Chinese view of Arunachal Pradesh is ridiculous. And a lot of reactions have come from the Chinese, which I'll just show. And then in Manila, he gave support to the territorial integrity of Philippines and South China Sea, where actually there is a lot of issues happening on almost a day-to-day basis, where collisions are happening and all that. And you see that China has reacted. Either, Jaishankar's remark over China's Zangan disregard common sense, a vicious attempt to win votes, say analysts, or says making trouble in South China Sea, wrong move for India, and all such things. So your overall strategic take on all these, sir, and the
Well,
geopolitical pushback which we have done is something.
very, very interesting. And I'm glad you put it across this way. You see, discussing it off such a slide with the map marked out, with these events there, mapped it completely, it makes it that much simpler. The first point I want to highlight for our viewers is we have always been critical of one thing about India, our own nation, is our inability to get our act together on communication strategy. You know, ask anyone and they'll say, see the global times, the manner in which they go after us internationally, this, that, etc. Why can't we ever do it together? Our media doesn't seem to be in sync with the government, etc. And then a lot of people used to remark saying, we are a democracy, and therefore in a democracy the media doesn't necessarily have to be the mouthpiece of the government, etc. But that seems to have all sort of diluted, and all that you are looking at the moment is a pushback which is being communicated by different means. It need not be communicated by word of mouth, it need not be communicated by media, it need not be communicated. It is being communicated by actions which are becoming very live. This aspect of the Prime Minister calls his call to Mr. Putin and to Zelensky. Who else in the world actually is in a position today among emerging world powers who could actually do this? I think the testing of waters was done by Prime Minister Modi in Tashkent in 2022, when he made that very famous statement, which went viral everywhere. This is not the season for war, right? That was communication strategy, at masterful use of communication strategy. It has developed, one statement has developed over a period of time, it has led to this. Could, for example, among the bigger powers, the important countries of the world, for example, a country like Japan, would Russia be confident to go to Japan to talk about this kind of a thing? Could the Japanese Prime Minister call up President Putin? No, it's not possible. Could South Africa do it? Could Brazil do it? I don't think so. I think India is there in physicality. It is close to the region, and it's got an excellent relationship with Russia. With Ukraine, we've got nothing negative. We've got nothing negative with Ukraine. We may not have supported them as such in fully, but we've not done anything against Ukraine as such. So we really haven't classically neutral. Here, look at the Prime Minister's visit to Bhutan. Very appropriate time, right time when this, well, some of them are ascribing it to elections and things like that. Be what it may, it is there to convey a message. The first visit the Prime Minister made in 2014 after his coming to power was to Bhutan. And almost the last foreign visit of the Prime Minister in this government's tenure, is also to Bhutan. Something symbolic, put together very well. At the same time, it's not displaced too far, but the external affairs minister's statements in Singapore, in Philippines, etc., have been timed almost very close to the Prime Minister's visit to Bhutan, if you're just looking at it. And at both places, he's made speeches, etc., but there have been some subtleties in it, which have come to light and obviously been caught by international media and obviously by the Global Times. Now, the Global Times manner of putting it across through his awkward cartooning and things like that is not very effective communication strategy at the moment. Now, I don't think the world is really appreciating it in this manner. This doesn't show mature communication strategy. India's methodology of doing it is far more subtle. The moment subtlety enters into the philosophy of communication strategy, it becomes that much more effective. And therefore, I compliment the government, I compliment the External Affairs Minister for the manner in which he has probably very, very deliberately steered this entire thing. This aspect of the public demonstration by Tibetans, obviously, Tibet, lots of people consider it to be a dead issue. I'm not sure if it is done to irk the Chinese. No. India doesn't take action, doesn't look at ways of irking countries with whom it has got relationships. Tibetans still have sentiments. We are a democratic nation. A demonstration by Tibetans who live in India is very much legal and they can go ahead with it. But to come at such a time when all these events are happening adds an additional flavor to it, right? And the event of Maldives, not something which perhaps was steered deliberately, but it just happened. And all of us, most of us who are observers of geopolitics, were saying it so. We were saying, leave Maldives. Don't bother about it, right? Invariably, this country will come back to us. It has, as you just stated it yourself, it has just come back to us. So, and then, of course, the last aspect of the public stance on Arunachal Pradesh, explained, it needs no explanation. It needs no explanation. The Indian standpoint is very well known. But certainly, if the External Affairs Minister goes to Singapore, the National University, if it goes to the National University of Singapore, if it speaks to the Rajaratnam School of International Studies and places like that, where lots of scholars of the world come, where the Shankar dialogue is held, most appropriate place to come and speak there for it to be taken note of. So, to my mind, the pushback in conjunction with communication strategy is what India has achieved here.
I think so, sir. And I think, contrary to what people think that India is not doing enough, I think India is doing a lot. And these are some which I've been able to catch. There would be many more which I've not been able to lay my hands on. In fact, I was listening to the talk by Dr. Jaishankar in the National University of Singapore. There are many more issues in that, but we'll take it up on a separate day because they're very critical issues and one of the best dialogues he's had there. Right. And then, of course, look at this. This is the, uh, you know, uh, statement by the defense spokesperson. I want you to look at the second part of it. He says, due to election, Modi wants to maintain China-India tensions, but not a war. Right? He grants that. And then he says, if a border war does break out, India will suffer a big loss. That's almost a threat. But that's what China, USA wants. So I think this leads us on to the risk factor of this pushback. So I would like you to dilate on the risks which you have outlined in your articles, and we'll discuss that, sir.
You see, I was quite deliberate in my thinking when writing about the risk aspects. I strongly felt that a benign approach has been carried out by India for far too long. Secondly, this is not offensive India. This is just an India which is creating the right structures for dissuasion more than even deterrence, I would say. Right? All these years, we were only hopeful that we could dissuade China, right? But we just did not have the means. Now we have been able to get our act together, particularly through this Atmanirbharta route, also through a review in our overall strategic thinking, the aspect of placing troops, even converting the LAC into LOC, etc. All this has come with the clarity in mind that this is not, the Chinese may not want to actually, the winnability of war in all these areas for the Chinese is highly suspect, right? Particularly the fact that anyone observing this would have seen the conventional war which has taken place between Russia and Ukraine. The differential was high even there. What has taken place between, in this case, Israel and Hamas in Gaza, almost a conventional war. Large number of terrorists, militant fighters, or whatever you want to call them. It has not led to any kind of a military victory. Military victories with modern technology developing today is becoming increasingly more difficult to achieve. And therefore, it's a huge risk that the side which is trying to be on the greater offensive, is a huge risk that it would incur. I think India has made effective use of this window which is available, and enhanced our overall capability, demonstrated our intent, and more importantly than anything, created a balance in our outlook of the continental versus the maritime. So all this has would put this particular statement which has been made by this military commander. He must remember, as far as Prime Minister Modi is concerned, for him the greatest dividend would be a lasting peace on the line of actual control or on the borders with the northern borders, because I don't think China understands Mr. Modi and his mind. Mr. Modi is very clear that he wants to take India to the next level of development. And in that, this is a sideshow. This aspect to make sure that we maintain our capability to defend ourselves, send home a message of dissuasion, but after developing that capability, all that we are essentially looking for is 2047 India being a developed state. I think that he has made clear any number of times. So someone who doesn't read enough, who does not look into the mind of our Prime Minister, perhaps goes away with this idea that he is warmongering, that he is going to Arunachal Pradesh to send home an offensive message across, daring the other side, etc. No, I don't think anything of that is true. All that he's doing is essentially sending a message to say we are capable of defending ourselves. We will continue developing that capability. But at the end of the day, our intention is an Atmanirbhar Bharat. At the end, ultimately 2047, we looked at a developed India. That's the whole intent behind it.
Yeah. Yeah, Viksit Bharat is the
Yeah,
goal.
Viksit Bharat.
And I'd like to put across one more issue, sir, is that the Himalayas gives you the advantage of being better off if you adopt a strategic defensive role rather than going into an offensive across. After all,
Absolutely.
the mountains are a defender's paradise and an attacker's nightmare, as we've all learned right from
All
our
learn
young
that.
days.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Now, so what are the rewards factor, the rewards part of this whole story? Where do they come in? Because we've done all this pushback, the risks, as you rightly said, are marginalized. Militarily, we are very well poised to defend ourselves. There's no question of a big loss, right? In fact, I don't think there'll be any loss which will take place also. And even in the maritime domain, we've held, in fact, we've more than held our, sea, not ground. We've held the seas and we are balanced, right? And the risk is marginalized. And wherever we have taken any pushback, I think has been calculated risk. Now, what are the rewards which you're going to get out of this? And what are those at stake? And what are the conditionalities which go with the reward? Because we'll do that together.
You see, there's no doubt that with all that has been done, there is going to be a tremendous dividend. And that dividend is already emerging, is already evident. The fact that the president of Russia and president of Ukraine have both looked towards India and its role in the meetings which are likely to take place in Switzerland in the near future, the supposedly peace process between Russia and Ukraine. That is an indicator. I won't say it's an indicator of India having arrived or something like that. No, that's not the important thing. It's an understanding, a psychological boost to India's strategic confidence and strategic capability, a recognition and an understanding internationally. Out of the BRICS countries, of course, China is one of them. If you look at it, India is the one which is emerged from this entire process of the last couple of years as a nation which is being looked upon as a mode with much more greater dependability and things like that. So obviously this image is making a huge difference. when it comes to strategic outlook of different nations, etc. Of course, it is inviting, which in terms of risk, it is still inviting one aspect. Nations around the world which also look at India with a degree of suspicion, particularly if you develop a military capability, a scientific and technological capability, nations will tend to look at you with a degree of suspicion. So be it. Those technologies are not offensive technologies, as we all know it. These are essentially defensive for use in defensively as such. But the spin-off of those technologies is going to help us in a great measure. So I think the fact that a couple of psychologically the boost to India's image has taken it a couple of notches higher, where now we are considered as partners capable of sitting on the high table. I think G20 itself was a major push. It gave India a very, very major push, and we look forward to all such opportunities which will come by in the future. Uh, so things like exercise Milan, which just happened, right? The ability to conduct an exercise of that nature successfully, the annual Malabar exercise to conduct that successfully. All this is a reinforcing thing to the psychological boost that India's image is receiving. And therefore, those early suspicions about Quad, for example, uh, whether India is a compatible partner, lots of nations were having doubts whether India is really a compatible partner or not, and things like that. I think much of that will tend to get allayed now. All those suspicions will probably tend to get allayed as they realize what India's demonstrated capability is. Um, at the end of the day, the advantage, the reward of putting you on the high table is also the fact that your overall deterrence, overall dissuasive capability has also enhanced that much. And it's not just China that we're talking about. We look at our neighborhood, we look at Pakistan, we can be reasonably more confident that we can handle our Western Front quite comfortably without getting too perturbed by it in the current state of things as it is. One word of caution only at the end, and this is possibly uh, 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 domain which we will discuss in the very near future. There is a rising tide of global terror which is coming from the West. And the moment a nation starts rising in its stature in this manner, you will find a tendency on the part of global terrorism to look at how it can impact such a nation. The United States, for example, at one time, then all those things which happened in London, in Madrid, in Paris, and Brussels, everything, looking at all that, once again, the targeting of India by global terror. This is something we got to be careful of.
Yeah, I think we need to factor that answer. And maybe one of these days we need to discuss how India is going to respond to future hybrid threats, identify the future hybrid threats. How do we respond to that? And how do we develop our own concept of hybrid and asymmetric war? Because that is something which is in the future, which we have to start thinking of. Uh, so I think we've covered the ground pretty well. Should I take on a few questions before we